If you could just introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Max Cyrus, owner of Max Cyrus Music record label, producer, songwriter, artist.
Great.
Cool.
And so you just watched the documentary.
Yeah.
What does hip hop mean to you?
Hip hop means everything to me. It's a culture, it's a way of life. It's been instrumental in how I grew up, and it's politically driven, it's community driven, and creative wise, it's something that it's like a magic sponge. It just absorbs everything around it, and just pushes out and projects out all of this great knowledge and pieces of music and creative people who can dance and sing and just give something back to then act as really good role models and inspire other people to do things within hip-hop and other areas of their life. Cool.
And how, if you tell me about the hip-hop music that you've grown up with.
Yeah. Like Public Enemy, Shut 'Em Down, the Pete Rock remix. That was a track that I bought on vinyl, and I remember getting like a Sony Walkman and a TDK like D90 tape and putting the vinyl on and recording the track and then putting it on again and just recording it until I had like 30 minutes worth of one song and just listening to that on the way to school and the way back home. And yeah, it was very inspiring. Seeing Rodney P with Public Enemy in the documentary and seeing him and how emotional he was, that kind of like made my heart like skip a beat. That was very, very powerful, very powerful.
That's great. You mentioned that, but what else stood out in the documentary for you?
I would say the level of knowledge that was being shared. Obviously, for someone like myself, I kind of felt like I had like quite a good knowledge of hip hop, and I learned a lot from watching Hip Hop World News. I think that regardless of what you think you know, like every day is a school day, and today I was taken to school, like literally. Regardless of the fact that, I rate Rodney P, he's a legend, and he was, narrating and interviewing people. The contributions from everyone, it just it made me feel like there's a lot that I need to learn. As a man, as a human being, being responsible as an artist in what I create, how powerful it is that when you create something and you put it into the world, what it does to people. And especially the fact that on this documentary, the track that ends the documentary is a track that, I'm bringing out on my label and co-produced, and I've worked with someone, DJ Billy Business, part of London Posse, who has been a massive role model in my life, and he worked with Rodney, and yeah, it's a really touching time. Everything was happening that I'm seeing, and that documentary is for me, it's a timeless piece. It's very, very timeless, especially what's happening out there in the world with everything that they touched on within the community. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah, do you want to talk about some of that?
I think I went to 2 of the Black Lives Matter marches in London, and it made me feel quite sick to see what was happening, and I would have felt guilty if I didn't go, so I'm glad that I did. It made me feel like writing and being creative with what I do music wise, and I'm really happy that the director Jamie was brave enough to put stuff in the documentary that wasn't just about, look at me, this looks great, look at what we can do with fancy cameras, and was happy to take something that everyone had seen on social media, bring it to the BBC, and that the BBC would be happy to say, we are going to bring that out, we are going to show that to the world, and include that in a documentary, not just about music, because like I said, hip-hop is a culture. It's not just about going in the studio making beats.
And just talking about that, what are your thoughts on, the documentary mentioned the hip-hop industry, the industry of hip-hop, and someone called that an industry of death. versus the original message of hip hop. And you said that you learned something from.
Yeah.
So when you kind of think about hip hop, and it'd be good to know your thoughts on it. Sorry, I'm really rambling. I'm sorry.
No,
I
that's
don't know
cool.
what's
That's
going
cool.
on. I've been doing
That's
this too long.
cool.
Your thoughts on the hip hop industry against the original message of hip hop, and how, you know, the difference between that and your, like, how that impacts you in the music you make.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm really sorry. Do you want
me
to?
to?
I kind of
lost
lost
it.
that a bit.
So-
I'm gonna have a
You
sip
lost
of
it, I've lost
it.
Tetley's
That's
tea whilst you.
I think that's what I knew.
So you said you learnt like a lot more about the message of hip hop and where it came from.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it kind of influences how you're making your music.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the question would be now either.
Yeah.
So how did you think the documentary conveyed like the change from the original message?
Okay, because you're
to the
saying
hip-hop
someone said like
industry?
it was saying that hip hop is deaf, and then obviously that's
Yeah,
not
the
what the
hip-hop
original
industry
message
is
was.
So
industry.
yeah. So now there's a big multi-million-pound industry,
Okay.
but before there was this hip hop meant something, and it was about, you know, community and giving a voice to the voiceless. Was that what the documentary said?
It still is, and it still does. You know, to be totally honest with you, it's like if you take a piece of coal, it doesn't mean anything, and you put it under a lot of pressure, and then a diamond is formed. And you take a community that doesn't mean anything to politicians, to a president, to a prime minister, and you've got people living under certain conditions, and all of the pressure that's put under those individuals, and then a diamond is formed. You've got hip hop, you've got things that are created that mean so much more to the world. And even with something that's great like a diamond, it's misused and it's unappreciated at times. And that's what's happened with hip hop. Is like you've got people who misinterpret the message, people who don't understand what music is about, being creative, what it's all about. And that's going to happen. You know, you can have a parent who loves their child and then hates their child the next day because they didn't do their homework. But it doesn't mean that they don't have unconditional love for their child. So you can have unconditional love for music and hate some of the things that come out in the music scene, whether it's the use of the N-word or how women are depicted within, you know, a certain type of industry. But at the same time, you can say, okay, I like the way how that sounds, I like this beat, I like what that's about. And we've seen it happen with so many individuals within the music industry, that one minute you can love Michael Jackson and you can hate what they say about him in the news. You can love Bill Cosby for what he done with the Cosby Show. You can hate what's been happening with him in the news. You can love hip hop because of the fact it gave us break dancing and people willing to spray paint and graffiti and rap and rhyme and scratching. But then you can hate the use of the N-word. And it's learning how to love and embrace all sides of what hip hop is about. And with regard to that, if you love music, you'll understand that with love, it makes you weak and strong at the same time. So with regards to hip hop, that's what it does. If you love hip hop, if you love music, there are going to be elements of it where it makes you feel kind of like that's a weakness, to use that word. That's a weakness to depict women in that way. And at the same time, you'd be like, actually, I can embrace it. You know, Kendrick Lamar comes on the scene, and actually then, you know, Black Lives Matter, that's actually like a really good comparator. You know, Black Lives Matter is something that was born out of something that's terrible that's happened to a set of people. And then Kendrick Lamar comes out with a track that then is used as an anthem for a movement of people. And he's a great artist, and that is a terrible thing that's happened to people. But out of love and movement, people have taken something from one side and used it to push towards and project something else. And that's what hip hop does. It draws people together through its culture, and that's a beautiful thing. So I would say that someone who says that it's at the death is at that point of where they don't love the relationship that they're in. Do you understand? And then there's a point where you step back and you say, actually, I learned a lot from that relationship. When I was younger, NWA meant a lot to me in a bad way, and Public Enemy meant a lot to me in a good way. when I grew up and NWA came out with a film, I could sit back and say, that's great what they've done. But at the time, I didn't think it was great. I used it as a way of harnessing the anger that I had growing up and understanding that there was something that kind of helped me keep that aggression going. But then when you get older and you mature, you feel like, nah, that's not what I want. But then there's still something within that whole culture of hip hop that you can embrace, and that's the beauty of hip hop, that you can take someone who will say something through love, something through hate, something that's happy day rap, something that's quite conscious like Kendrick, something that's quite deep and meaningful like what Rodney P can do. And for me, I just want to say that's why Rodney P is a legend for me, because he can narrate something, be an artist top of his game. The only thing constant is change, and within that time this guy has managed to inspire me, keep hold of people that he was working with when he started, and be an educator for a documentary that's going to go and educate like the masses. So that's amazing.
Great.
A beautiful